A very good afternoon to you all. I hope you're all doing fantastic today. In this video, what I'm going to demonstrate is how to interview a candidate like a real experienced recruiter. So whether or not you've been recruiting for a while, you're going to gain some value from this video. Whether you're new to recruitment, you're going to know exactly the best way to get the best out of a candidate without annoying them, without sounding like a cheesy money grabbing recruiter, which most people are, and it's not their fault. They've never been trained to interview a candidate. So the important thing to note when you're interviewing someone is they're a human being, and you want to build that relationship with them to avoid them either ghosting you, one, going missing, two, being honest with you, and three, just finding out if they are right for the job. So without further ado, I'll get into the interview. I broke it down into three key points. So one is the screening, the qualifying. The second one is the part where you actually check if they're suitable for the job. And the third part is just the HR compliance questions and just double checking everything from there. So, whether or not they've come to you from an application, some things will be different. Whether or not you've headhunted them and you've asked for some time to have a chat with them and tell them about the role, some things will differ, but this will give you everything you need to know when interviewing a candidate. So, this is all by telephone as well. So, the interview actually starts when you get the brief from the client. And this is probably the most important thing. So if you're not being briefed by the client, um, it's a little more difficult. It's still possible, but I believe and I recommend highly that you have a chat with the client at least minimum by email so you get all these points down. So I'll start off from the top. So the example would be if you said to the client, if they said to you, look, what's the most important, what's the key point that I need to highlight and look for? So they might say, look, we want someone that's a graduate that has experience in the fintech sector. Yeah, if they highlight something like that, you know for a fact if you find someone with that skill set, 9 times out of 10 they're going to get a placement. Another one could be like a nurse, and they say if someone's done this qualification in like a respiratory nurse, then they're definitely going to get the job as well. And that's very key. So always, if you could wave a magical wand, Mr. Client, what would the ideal candidate look like for you? Or what's something I really need to look out for? Something that will get you excited if you see it on the CV. Yeah. So manage their expectations. Say, look, it's going to be difficult. I'll try my best. Yeah. And don't make it out as in this is the definite. They have to have this. If they do say that, great. Like my example, it's the fintech one. That'll be something where you could look at and say, oh, first question to the candidate is, do you have experience in fintech? But you'll see it from their CV. Yeah. Another one is, when you actually screen the candidate, you're going to look at the CV beforehand. So you're not exactly going to call the candidate and then ask that. If you don't see it on the CV, unlikely they're going to have that experience. Or if they're not a graduate, you're not going to call them and waste your time. A lot of it is around wasting time, your time, the candidate's time, and especially the client's time. Yeah. You want to find out the salary, hours of the job. Yeah, sometimes most job adverts don't actually have it on the thing, the job description. So if a client says to you the salary is between 20 and 25, great. What are the hours? It's a standard month of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Is there overtime? These little questions. So I want to preempt everything that a candidate is going to ask me. Yeah. Another thing that people don't ask when they're talking to clients is, what's the positives of the role? How am I going to help? How would you like me to market? What's the benefit of working at your organization? If your client is like, we get holidays, 20 days holiday, you know exactly they're not really good at recruiting. Not to say they're a bad client, but there's some things you can help them with. Look, great. Let's explore this a little bit. Yeah. How would I sell the role? Has anyone progressed? So progression is big on candidates. Do you offer remote working? Yeah. Do you offer flexible working? Is there time off? What's the benefits? And they'll say, yeah. Most people are very proud to talk about their company and positives as well. And another thing is an important one is the negatives. So there are negatives with the role. The clients will know this. Oh, our location. We're in the middle of nowhere. If they say CADS, I'll be honest with you. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no universities for our qualified, skill set. We're going to have to look at remote workers. Yeah. Okay, great. So if you say, look, why hasn't the role, have you gone to interview stage? Is what I usually ask. Not why hasn't the role been filled. I usually ask, have you gone to interview stage with any candidates? They'll give you a wealth of information by asking that question. They'll say, yeah, we've got about 6 interviews lined up. Then you know, okay, great. They may or may not going to fill it. If they say, look, we've interviewed 6 people, yeah? Also find out the interview process. So is it a 6-stage interview? Is it a 1-stage interview? Yeah, I usually try and negotiate when I get to know them. I'll say, look, you're confident in my ability. I've made 4 placements with you. Would you be confident for me to do the first stage interview? Yeah. So I've done that with one client, and they've said, yeah, here's our questions, and you can do the first stage interview. They just wanted me to write it all down and send it to them. Yeah. Actually, two clients I've done that with. One I'm currently doing with it, and one I've done in the past. Also, a CV jumpy. Yeah, I always get this because this is something that gets candidates rejected no matter what their skill set is. But a CV jumpy is they've had 6 jobs in the last 2 years. Yeah, and I do ask on a client brief, if I sent you a CV with someone that was outstanding but they've had 4 jobs in the last 12 months, what would you say to me? Would that be a rejection? Should I not waste your time? Usually they'll say, yeah, yeah, send it across if you think they're good. So I've sort of preempted that if I do find a candidate, because there's some brilliant candidates out there, and nowadays there's a lot of bad companies out there, so people do move around, and it's much easier to move around. Yeah. So an important thing is, why do recruiters actually interview candidates? Most people think, oh, just to check if they're going to be suitable for the job. The main reason is to match the client's expectations of the skill set to match the role, and also we want to make sure that the candidate is going to be happy there. We don't actually want to, actually interview the candidate. We're not going to be asking competency-based questions unless the client has instructed us to do so. You might do it in a subtle way. So you're going to see everything I do when we're interviewing is going to be slightly different. Yeah. So one, we're going to screen their skills. A CV can tell you a lot about someone without having to actually get on the phone. Also, I love to learn about my candidates. I keep in contact with every single candidate that I've ever spoken to that has got a placement through me, to the point where some of them are good friends of mine. And to build up the relationship is key. Now, if you look at someone that's really, really successful in recruitment, they just work with the same candidates over and over, and those candidates go to that recruiter. So all in all, I definitely want to learn about the candidate to the point where sometimes by the end of the call we're having a laugh on the phone. If you can get to that stage with candidates, they trust you, they're not going to let you down. Yeah, I'm not saying to be unprofessional and laugh about it, but get to know them as a person. Be that different recruiter. It stands out so much. Do their values match the organization? Yeah. What I mean by that is a lot of interviews are conducted. I would say 20% of the interview is of whether they're going to get the job is based on their values. So if someone is looking for something that's very close to their heart, let's say a charitable effort, their values would match. Alternatively, why we would interview the candidate is if you're recruiting for a salesperson and the managing director doesn't want someone that's a cheesy salesman that's gonna say, yeah, mate, I can sell anything. If he doesn't want that, his values wouldn't match the company's, and that's really, really important. Alternatively, if you've got like a really high flying legal firm, you need someone that's really, really aggressive with their sort of studies. They've gone above and beyond. You need to match that. You can't send someone soft in that's not going to get the job. Yeah, because it'll just be a really unpleasant experience for the candidate. Yeah. Avoid any mistakes happening is the one thing we do. So if you don't screen the candidate properly, you don't interview them, and you say to the candidate, oh, I didn't check the location and it's really far, and then it comes to interview and the candidate's like, well, that's so far from me, I can't go there. So it's important to avoid any mistakes happening, or the recruiter getting the wrong end of the stick, sending the candidate in and the candidate wasn't really looking. Yeah, so you just want to avoid any mistakes, because the client will lose faith in you very, very quickly. You'll get disheartened and you'll think recruitment isn't for me. Yeah, and avoiding the candidate being there not for long term. So your job isn't just to get the placement. Your job is to make sure, the number one thing, clients don't care about the money. I've spoke to clients, and to be honest, my fees have gone really high at the moment. The reason being, clients don't mind to pay, and the number one thing that they're actually after is longevity. Somebody to stay and retain in their business and grow with their business. That's the number one thing clients want. Not the fee is really bad or the fee's too high. They don't care. So your job, how you can do that, I'll get into in a second. In terms of actually making sure that person's a good fit. A simple example of that, or making sure they're going to actually last the test of time. Have they done it? Was their last job 8 years and now their company's closing down? I'm guessing that person's very loyal and they're going to stay. The other thing, or the negative thing with that, is it does show that they're not looking to sort of progress their career. So if your client is looking for that, it's going to be difficult. So this is the start of the interview. So if you get on the phone, you exchange pleasantries. Hello, Mr. Candidate, how are you? Or Mrs. Candidate, whatever. Yeah. Introduce yourself. I just want to explain a bit about the position to you, the job, give you all the information you want, and then we can make a decision at the end. Yeah. At any point, stop me if you've got any questions. Yeah. How does that sound? Great. Let's carry on. So I do what most recruiters don't do. I tell the salary, location, name of the company. I don't care. I'm not going to waste my time if the candidate has sent an application in last week, or they've already been interviewed, or they didn't like the company. Yeah, I tell them straight away. So I was always taught, don't tell the client name and don't tell the salary. I don't know why, but why you wouldn't? I never got the salary part. I understood the company part because they might apply direct. Yeah, or they might tell another recruitment agency. That's fine, but if I can't fill it, I bet you the other recruiter can't fill it. Is how I see it. There's not really much competition. So yeah, the position is based in blah blah blah. Is that local to yourself? Yeah. Do you drive? Is there any transportation? So I go on Google Maps and I say, oh, it's only a 20 minutes drive. Yeah, that's perfect. It might be a remote position, so bear that in mind as well. Salary. So I don't ask what's your expected salary. I don't care actually. Yeah, I just want to make sure that the salary is good enough for the candidate. Yeah, if they're on 28 now and the job is paying 25, I wouldn't want them to take a pay cut unless they said, yeah, I don't care. It's closer to home. I'm going to save money on travel costs. Perfect. But if they say, oh, I'm on 21, why am I going to ask that only if I'm going to lowball them? I'm not making the offer of salary. I just say, give me what would you need in order for you to do this job. Yeah, and I'll get to a point how you'd ask that in a subtle question. I go through the working hours. So sometimes you can get a Saturday job. So it's Monday, let's say Tuesday to Saturday, and I want to make sure that they're not interested in working Saturday. Yeah, I don't want to work nights, or I can't work weekends because I've got children. Yeah, fine. You're not suitable for the job. I'll call you about something else, or I have something else available now. Yeah, I want to check the job description matches what their skill set is. If they don't have experience in X, Y, Z, then I can't put them forward, and there's no point progressing the conversation. These shouldn't really. A lot of this information can be found out by their CV. So salary, you should know the market. You can just ask that. Location should have their address on there. So you shouldn't be calling someone that's an hour and a half away. Yeah. And anything else the client deems suitable. So in my first example, it was the fintech experience. Yeah. And I know you'd say to the candidate, I saw from your CV you have experience in fintech. Did you enjoy it? Oh yeah, I loved it. It was great. I wish I could stay at that company, but it was only an internship. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I'll explain a little bit about the job role and why that's important in a second. That's what I would say. Yeah, and I use this phrase. The company is Google or Facebook or whatever. Have you ever come across them or heard of them before? And they'll say yeah or no. If they say yeah, I applied last week. Oh, okay, great. They'll probably be in touch with you then. Yeah. Or no, I don't want to work there. It's a horrible company. I've read reviews on them. Yeah. That's what you sort of need to allude to. If somebody gets to this stage and all the boxes are ticked, so these 4 points need to be ticked. Once that's done, you progress with the actual interview. Yeah. So there's a few things I look for with a candidate, and bear in mind this will all change from the client brief, whatever they've said to you. So attitude, do they sound interested? Yeah. Did they give you their chase around? Did they not show up? Were they late for the interview? Yeah. What do they sound like? If they're asking questions like very confidently, usually a candidate that's desperately looking for a job will engage with you and speak to you differently than someone that has 12 job offers and thinks they're high and mighty. Yeah. So the attitude is key for me. Yeah. How's their phone mannerism? Does the job involve phone mannerisms? Do they speak well? Are they clear? Do they talk over you? Do they listen? Do they understand? Etc. General sort of things. You don't have to ask questions, just how the conversation goes. Because one, do I want to put a rude candidate that's unlikely to show up in front of my client? Definitely not. Yeah. And that could be perceived in many, many ways in terms of the client might think, oh, you're just sending anyone in as well. Yeah. And some people, we're all from different cultures and different areas. Some people will be a bit more reserved than others. I don't want someone shouting and dancing on the phone to me. Yeah. So I want to also highlight any part of the job the candidate might not like. So just to make you aware, this job does involve you um, developing reports. Would you be okay with that? Have you had experience in it? Yeah. That's what I always ask. So if I'm just trying to find out if they've got experience, I'll say the job itself, because I don't want to make the candidate feel bad that they don't have the right experience. Because sometimes they can be left quite upset about, oh, I didn't get put through. So I want to make sure this job involves you traveling door to door. Have you had experience with that? Would you be okay with that? Oh no, I haven't, but I'll be okay with it. Great. So I want to highlight that, and all these points I'm writing down as I go. Yeah. Also, the positive of the job. Yeah. By the way, this job does offer remote work, which is what all candidates ask for. So I always want to find that out. Yeah. Also, the previous manager that you're going to be interviewed by potentially actually got to that managerial position in 12 months. So there is definitely room for progression in this organization. Yeah. That's a sort of positive. So it's progression, salary, bonuses, anything like that that will highlight. Yeah. Also, do they have the job for the skills for the job? That's important. Yeah, you don't want to obviously put someone forward that doesn't have the necessary skills. That probably would happen before you actually call them, or any key points you need to highlight, you can just ask them outright. Yeah. Also, any gaps on the CV you want to sort of highlight and make this a very soft one. So I usually say, look, to me it doesn't make any difference, Mr. Candidate, but I know my client will ask, just for clarity, it won't affect your interview. They will ask, why did you leave your last position? Or how comes you've had 12 jobs? You can understand. And I usually say, if they get arsy about it, then I say, look, I can't put you forward if you're going to get upset about that. But they usually say, yeah, I relocated, I changed job, it was a horrible place. Just between us, I usually say, was it a horrible place to work, etc. And I usually just say, look, honesty is the best policy. I'll be happy to document it. And the reason you want to document it is because most employers are understanding. They usually think, okay, great, yeah, he's moved location, he's got a promotion, he moved for a higher salary. I understand, yeah. And also, what's the hardest part of the job? I usually ask just to get a deeper understanding. And also, what do you love about the job? These are questions that are framed differently, but I'm actually getting the same answer as by asking, what are you really good at? What's your strengths and what's your weaknesses? That's what that question asks. And if they say, look, the hardest part of the job is, maintaining the client relationship. Oh God, yeah, I totally understand. So how do you do it? And people like to talk about themselves in a different way without being asked a question. And say they have like they're an estate agent or something, you would say, look, how do you manage 100, you know, people that you manage, or how do you manage 100 properties? They're like, well, you need to be organized, and they get really proud about how they're good at it. Yeah. And what do you love about their job? Oh, I love it when I get a sale, when I'm a estate agent, when I sell a big house. Oh, great. What was the biggest one you sold? So it becomes a conversation that you're just asking, yeah, and it'll be relevant to your industry. You can obviously ask the question. So they'll say, oh, I sold £1 million. Bang. That's something I'm going to highlight to the client. Yeah. So strengths and weakness, and I wouldn't call it strengths and weaknesses. I'll just put it to the client when I send the documents and CV over. Now, another thing is what you're going to ask is the sort of HR questions, yeah. And notice period. Do you have a notice period at present? This is important because it shows how soon they can actually start work. So if it's an urgent position, the client needs them urgently. That's something you can look at, yeah. If they've got holidays, say they've got a 4 week notice, sometimes candidates have 3 months notice. I've worked with before, and some have fallen through before that I've worked with. Do they have a notice period? Is there a holiday involved? Can you shorten the holiday? So if they've got 2 weeks holiday, actually they've got 2 weeks notice period, so they can start before. That's just something if you were to be offered the position, what would be your notice period? Is how I'd frame it. Yeah. Also, I want to find out what made you get on the phone with me. Why did you start looking? What made you apply for this position? Yeah. And I always ask just to check. Most recruiters will say, "Are you interviewing elsewhere?" And the candidate will always say, "No, I'm not." And if I say, by now they've got to know me and they can see I'm not an ordinary recruiter because of the way I've questioned and asked and explained everything. Yeah, I've won their trust from the start simply by telling them who the company is. Yeah, and if you're working exclusively, you can advertise broadly because no one else will work with him. So, have you been looking for a while? Yeah, this is a very powerful question, very important. So if I say to a candidate, have you been looking for a while? And they say, yeah, I've been looking for 6 months. I want to know why they haven't found a job in that time. Or what have they done? Or if they say, yeah, I've started looking, I've got a few interviews lined up, is what they usually say. Okay, great. So I know I need to get another candidate in because they're unlikely to accept a job Possibly because they're going to have other offers. Yeah. Current salary. I don't ask what's your salary expectations. I always say the salary for this position is paying 20 to 25. Is this in line with what you're looking for? Yes, it is. That sounds about right. Or it's too low, it's too high, goodbye. Yeah. And they usually say, is it more or less? Because I'm respectful. Some people don't like talking about their salary. So I usually say, is it more or less than you're on now? Oh, it's less. Then I want to find out why. If they say it's more, fantastic. Hopefully, we can get you more and a salary increase with better working conditions, local, remote working. I want to give you all of that. Yeah, possibly. When can you interview is another important question, and you want to preempt this. So if a client says, fantastic, I want to interview them, when are they free? You want to have that before they actually ask. So if a candidate says to me, I could potentially interview next week, Wednesday. Yeah, I would say and put that on the write up when I email the client. I say this person is available, and I put it in red. They're available to interview on Wednesday. No other recruiter does that from what I've ever seen. So it shows you've gone really in depth with the client, and you just want to make the client's job easier. Yeah. GDPR compliant. If you're in the UK, you want to ask permission to send their details, CV. Of course, you'll take all the contact details off. Yeah. Afterwards, I usually end the call with, when am I going to update them? So I say to the candidate, I will be sending you, let's say, what day is it today? I think it's Tuesday today. So I will say, look, typically from my experience, the client usually takes 2 working days to get back to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send your CV in with your permission, and I'm going to come back to you on Thursday. So I'm going to put a calendar reminder to myself to give the candidate a call, and then I'm going to send them give them a call, let them know what's happening if I haven't heard, and I'll also chase up the client. So I let them know what's going to happen, and I book a calendar in with them, so they know I'm going to call. Sometimes I miss it, but sometimes 9 times out of 10 I do always call them on that day. I do, in terms of the time frame. Yeah, and I always give my contact details. So I give an out of hours mobile number if they need to reach me. So they might want to just text me and ask a quick question. I also contact them on link. I ask them, do you have a LinkedIn? If you want, connect with me on there, because if this position isn't right for them, something else might come up later on. Yeah, and I give my email address. Obviously, they probably have it at that stage. Yeah, so that's the general interview, quite in depth. Interviews can last anywhere with me, anywhere from 5 minutes to 2 hours. And I'm not even joking. I don't make as many interviews as usual, but typically they last about 40 minutes. I do not do a 5 minute interview with a candidate. It's a good way to see if the candidate is actually interested. Of course, if they're pressed for time, I will out of hours interview them. That's no problem if they're at work. I don't have any issue with that. You want to make sure you're available at those times. I'm usually busiest at 5 to 6 most days. I'm lunchtime, I would say, in terms of candidates. Other than that, I'm account management and headhunting people. So there isn't much in line with what you cannot go through. Things will change depending on how the candidate came to you. Also, the client brief, what the job spectre is, if there's qualification or regulations involved, you want to check all that and screen it. Yeah. So after that, I've made notes while I was interviewing the candidate on my CRM. So I bullet pointed everything, and I want to highlight the key points. Yeah, and I'm not looking to sell the candidate at all. Most people think, oh, I've got to sort of bend their words and treat. I'm just going to send them in. Excuse me. I'm going to send it in exactly as I heard it. There is no fluff, no fluff. I'm not looking to sell the candidate. I'm presenting the candidate that I've sourced, yeah, to the client to make a decision themselves. I use that opportunity to learn more about the client. If they say no, they don't have this experience, fine. Next person I send will have that experience, Mr. Client. Yeah. Is there anything else I need to be aware of? If they're rejected, 9 times out of 10, my candidates do not get rejected because I've done such a thorough investigation on them. And you want to see the candidate's commitment. If you offer commitment, they'll give you commitment as well. And they'll be straight up with you. Some will still lie. We know that. Some will go missing, but I don't take it to heart at all. So your job as a recruiter is to find the people and make your client's life easier. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. They don't want you to interview the candidate. They will interview. A client will interview for the job way better than I can ever do because they know the company, they know the job, they know what it's going to entail, and they know what skills they're looking for. So I hope you enjoyed this video and it's been helpful. If you have any questions, please get in touch and leave your comments below if you found it useful.